start this. Do you guys see my thing?
Yep.
Okay, so I hope you all see my screen. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this is going to be recorded and rebroadcast on Facebook. So just to let you all know that. So first, what I'm going to do is just start with an introduction around the topic, and then I'm going to move to discussion, and we're probably going to wrap up around 6:30. So does that work?
Works for me.
Cool. So you may notice I'm playing a song. I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's Book of Love from the Monotones. And it's a song. Hold on. It looks like I'm going to have to admit every person. Let me just fix all these.
Want me to sing it for you?
Yeah, can you do that?
Who wrote the book of The Book of Love. Chapter 1.
Yes, yes. So
with all your heart.
let me allow this for everyone to come in. Mute all participants. Let's see. Okay. So actually, everyone just give me 1 second. I usually don't have these functional issues, but I guess it has to happen to all of us sometimes.
Well, new technology.
Take your time. We have no place to go.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, till 6:30.
Home.
We're all here. Allow participants. Yeah, I don't need for anyone to stay in the waiting room anymore. Okay. Okay, so people should be able to freely come in. Great, so let me start this one more time. So good evening, everyone. Good to see all of your faces. My name is Noelle, and I am a consultant at the Newark Public Library. And today we're going to be having a chat with some folks about archives and teen culture and teen lives and history, and how we can use archives for teen projects as well as adult projects, and just really looking for different ways that folks may not know about, just to share the resources that we have, right? So I'm not going to play it again, but I know we could just have like a whole dance session. But I started with the Monotones, Book of Love. It's a hit from 1958. And basically one of the reasons why I started with the song is because the folks who were a part of the Monotones, they actually formed a group in 1955 when they were teenagers living at the Baxter Terrace Housing Project. And they actually worked with Sissy Houston, and eventually they had an album which peaked on #5 on the Billboard Top Hits in 1958. And what's I think is interesting about this is, what does it mean for us to like think about teen lives and teen lives in the archive? Bill May, who's one of the panelists today, told me in a Facebook entry that he had some like archival images and things about the Monotones. But what does it mean to like look at history through the lens of teen lives and teen culture? And what are the other different implications of that, right? So if we know they were raised in the Baxter Terrace Housing Project, then what exactly might that give us a deeper insight into it? One of the things that we see about, just to do a brief overview of teen culture, what we call teen culture really exploded in the American public's imagination in the 1950s. So with the popularity of television and provocative culture, such as like music and dance associated with youth, like rock and roll, it helped. And also through targeted marketing, it helped to develop a teen market and consciousness. So while we've always had young people, as you guys know, there was not a whole kind of like agenda, culture, consciousness around what it meant to be a teen. There were rites and rituals prior to that. There was marriage and other things. But as far as developing this teen persona, which is now embodied in our culture, the way we dress, even in the teen room, our young adult fiction, those are all late 20th century manifestations of teen culture. The apex of this was in 1971 when Congress voted to lower the federal age from 21 to 18 through the 26th Amendment to the Constitution. And as many of you know, or maybe not, this issue was pushed largely to the Vietnam draft, right? So folks were like, well, if we can go over and fight, we should definitely be able to vote. Newark's own grassroots entertainment culture, combined with its proximity to New York and Philadelphia, gave it greater access to ideas and culture. So we see this consistently in the work of like New York artists, New York ideas, New York thoughts. I mean, Kristen might explore this a little bit with queer Newark, but what we see over and over again is that the development of like movements, artists, consciousness, various things are part of a grassroots culture here in Newark, but also this proximity to other cultures, right? Avant-garde cultures as well. So what you guys see over here is just a shout out to digital.npl at Newark Public Library. It's an image of some East Side High School baseball players who were at a television studio at Bamberger's. So they were taping a segment. So. We're going to have just, since this is a brief chat, we're going to concentrate on two main topics, right? That are actually very different. So one thing or one question the panelists are going to respond to are how are the lives of teens represented in Newark archives? Now, for someone like Bill May, who's speaking from Newark Public Schools Archive, that's pretty straightforward, right? So they work to preserve the information of Newark's public schools. So that includes like textbook, yearbooks and other information that an archival history of the students of Newark. So here we see an image from the Newark Student Union sit-in protest from 2015, which I think has been an unexplored event in the history of Newark teen protests as well as working class students. And then also it requires that we take another look at archival documents and archival matter in history that we haven't looked at with a teen lens. So here on Rise Up North, Crystal Spellman, who was Eloise Spellman's daughter, as some of you may know, Eloise Spellman was killed in one of the projects by the National Guard during the Newark Rebellion or the Newark riots. And she witnessed her mother being shot in the neck in the living room and falling on the couch. And she was a teenager then. And so what happens when we look at the Newark Rebellion through the eyes of teenagers? So another aspect is to look at large movements that are inspired by teens. So for example, Sakia Gunn, who was murdered by Richard McCullough on May 11th in 2003. She was attacked by him for presenting as lesbian and butch. Her murder inspired both youth and adult activism in Newark. And Queer Newark really explores an outgrowth of this activism. So I want to thank Kristen for joining us. So what we're going to start with first is we're going to have 2 rounds of questions. So first, Kristen will speak, and then about Queer Newark and how teen lives are represented in the archives. And then Tom from Newark Public Library will speak primarily about the COVID-19 archive that the library is working on now, and whatever else he may. And then Mr. Bill May will be talking about Newark Public Schools. And then after that, we'll also look at a second question about how folks can use these resources, how educators and teams can use it. And then we'll close out. So I guess we will start with Kristen. So let's all see their beautiful face. So, hi, Kristen.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to see everybody virtually. And so my name again is Kristen Scorsone. I'm a PhD student at Rutgers Newark, and I've been working with the Queer Newark History Project for quite a few years now. I also did my master's at Rutgers Newark, and I started with Queer Newark then. So I think that was like 2015 maybe when I started working with Queer Newark. So anyway, our whole project is centered on collecting, preserving, and documenting the lives of LGBTQ folks who are living in or are of or from Newark. And we house all of these interviews in a digital repository, meaning we have them up on our website. So you can listen to those interviews as well as read written transcripts. And this project came about in 2011. It was founded by Christina Strasburger, who is a department administrator in history and African American and African studies at Rutgers Newark, as well as Burl Satter, who is a historian at Rutgers Newark, and Darnell Moore, who was a graduate student and has gone on to do some amazing things. He has a book, and yeah, he used to do Mike.com videos. He's really rad. They had a series of meetings over the summer of 2011 with LGBTQ community members, because we wanted to make sure they wanted to make sure this project was created in concert with the community and responded to the needs of the community. Yeah. What they learned the community wanted was to preserve the history through interviews, through personal narratives. So hence the Queer Newark Oral History Project was born. And so in terms of like, well, actually I should say too that we also had a couple of conferences in the first couple of years. And then when I joined the project, we started really heavily interviewing people. There's a ton of interviews on the website. You know, there's activists, there's religious leaders, there's young people, there's people in the ballroom community. There's just a large range of people, activists from like the 1960s that were, you know, like some became famous in the anti-war movement, things like that, or, you know, housing advocacy. So yeah, so like in terms of teens represented in the Newark archives, we have a few young folks that are interviewed, not so many people that are under the age of 18 or anything like that because of rules against that in terms of the institution. But the youngest person, Noelle figured back and checked, is Patrice Johnson, who is, if you look at her interviews, she's sort of, I think, one of the most compelling interviews. Her interview is really great, but she was part of Out in the Night, which is a documentary based on a real thing that happened where 4 young women from Newark who are lesbians, who are African-American, were walking in New York City and were violently harassed by a man on the street. And they fought back. Unfortunately, the news and the judge, their case went to court and they were construed as a girl gang. a gang of killer lesbians, I believe is how the newspapers portrayed them, which is, you know, sexist, racist, homophobic, all of that. So, you know, so for fighting back, they got charged. And so her story is really, really amazing. But also we focus a lot on her life in Newark, and not just in that later part where, you know, the documentary covers, but really focusing in on her Newark story. We also have someone named Cesare Adams, who's a couple years older than Patrice, and he speaks to what it's like being Black and a gay police officer in Newark. I also talked to two of my team members to see, because they had done some interviews recently with young people. So I asked them if they could tell me about them. So Esperanza, who's a new member, she's amazing. She told me that she interviewed someone named Leah Neymar, or Lily, and that person has an LGBTQ perspective from the Puerto Rican community.
Oh, okay.
North Ward of Newark, as well as Dion Session. And that person speaks to issues covering masculinity, non-binary identities, domestic violence, and death. Now, another team member, Kennedy, told me that she interviewed two young people, and these two interviews, I'll say, are not up on our website yet. They're still in the pipeline. We have a very strict consent process where we make sure that people have time to read and review their transcripts, so they can pull out anything that they don't want to have in the archive or on the website, because this is sensitive information, you know, so you might realize that you outed someone, or you might have talked about your mom in a way that you no longer want out there. So we allow people to vet their transcripts and remove stuff. So these people are likely still reviewing theirs. But so Kennedy had said that Paulina was about 18 or 19. Riley, the other person, is about 21. Both of them grew up in Newark, lived in the city their whole lives. Paulina spoke at length about what it was like to live in a primarily Latinx neighborhood and the constant hovering presence of immigration officials. Riley talked about navigating and re-navigating identity, specifically what it's like to come out as a young person, only to then understand your identity better later and then have to re-come out, you know, a second time. And then I just want to point out that, like, although, you know, you're not going to find like someone who's 15 speaking in our interviews, all of our interviewees, pretty much all of them, are asked about their earlier lives. So through them, you can find out like what it was like to be a transgender woman in the 70s. You know, like if you look at Miss Poochie Revlon's interview, she's talking about like coming out as a trans woman in high school in the 70s, and her father being like, hey, so long as your purse matches your dress, I'm fine. You know, like amazing stories. So, or like Marina Carrera talking about being a first generation Portuguese immigrant in Ironbound. Marlene Franco talks about the first time she got to wear pants, you know, in I think the 60s, like as a kid, and what freedom and the texture of the pant, like just down to these really interesting details. So, you know, or Tiny Pringle talking about being a Black butch youth playing on a basketball team with all butch girls her age, you know, in the 70s, and traveling the state and the surrounding states. So you can really use it as a lens to see what it's like to be a teen, a queer teen, an LGBTQ plus teen in different historical contexts locally in Newark, which is I think is so cool.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And as Kristen pointed out, what I think is interesting about the oral histories that are part of that is people do explore what it means to be a teen coming out, or a teen in Newark, and also what we see as other information about Newark. So some of the people talk about the Newark riots or rebellion, or they talk about working in Newark and other issues. So I would like to introduce Tom. So, well, actually, I'm not doing formal introductions today, but thanks.
Names are on the screen, so. So hi, everybody. I'm Tom Ankner. I'm director of the Charles F. Cummings New Jersey Information Center, which is a department at the Newark Public Library. And I will be talking about the COVID-19 archive that we're putting together. But before that, I just want to talk a little bit about the room and some of the teen resources we have. We don't really collect a ton of material about teenagers in Newark, but we do have a few things. That photo that Noelle, you used in your presentation, the East Side High School baseball player, that's Amber, that came out of the Newark Schools photo collection, which is housed in the New Jersey room, and we've digitized those photos and they're available on the digital archive, which is where you got that photo from. I just did a search on teens in some of our archival collections. We had an item from the Librariana archive, some photo from teens doing a poetry reading in 2002 in one of the branches. And we have, other things like that. We have some books from the Stratemeyer Syndicate, which was a syndicate of, the Stratemeyer Syndicate published books for children and teens in the early 20th century. It was where the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books were born. And there are some books that we have in our RAI collection in the New Jersey room. That's books by or about, books that are published in New Jersey or books that are about New Jersey, books by New Jersey authors. So we do have some materials about teens, and if people want to come in and research that material, they're welcome to come in when we're open, not right now, but or they can send us an email, njreference@npl.org. But I also am here primarily to talk about the COVID-19 archive, and we are calling it Documenting an Incredible Moment in Time. We decided we started this a few weeks ago. We've gotten several submissions, some thanks to Noelle, and including Noelle. Thank you very much, Noelle. But we've also gotten some others. And we are taking submissions from people of all ages, including teenagers. I think the youngest submitter so far is 19. But we also have a submission from, my cat's meowing behind me. But we also have a submission from a principal of a charter school who includes some pictures of teens in her pictures. And we are asking people to submit written reminiscences of what it's like going through this, sheltering in place, sending us photos taken with your phone, screenshots of social media posts. If you want to make a short video, we did get one video so far. We ask that they not be more than 5 minutes. We really don't want really long things, but short videos, photos, written reminiscences in an email. As I said, screenshots of social media posts, anything that kind of represents what people are going through at this moment in time in Newark, having to stay at home, shelter in place, just this really unusual experience we're all going through right now. And so you can send your reminiscences to our email, njreference@npl.org. And that's my little plug for the COVID-19 archive, which we're calling Documenting an Incredible Moment in Time.
Thank you, Tom.
On the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to actually at the end, I'm going to post a resource to folks on the Facebook page, but I'll also give my email. It'll have the list of all of the archives and the information about the COVID-19 archive. Thank you, Tom.
Great.
And
Thank
I know,
you, Noelle.
and I know you might have to leave early, but I will have Tom's information, so if anybody needs to contact him. So next up is Mr. Bill May, last but not least. Wow, it's been 40 years of saying that, right?
Well, anyway, I'm here. Good evening, everybody. I guess I come from a slightly different perspective, and as someone who was educated in the Newark Public Schools, I started in kindergarten and took a break after 12th grade to go on to college and then come back into Newark and teach, taught music. The Newark Public Schools Historical Preservation Committee looks at a bigger picture in terms of the history of the school system itself, which encompasses all ages. And just wanted to go back to one of your the second slide, maybe the third slide about protest. one of the projects, one of the things that we're doing in the Newark Public Schools Historical Preservation Committee is that we are also doing interviews. Ours are audio, and did about maybe a 2-hour audio interview with Lawrence Ham, who was involved in,
Yes.
in that, the student protest years ago, and same thing with Akili Buchanan. So those 2 interviews, I believe they are now in the Newark Public Library archives. They're unedited, they're raw. You hear the emotion of both young men, and from how it impacted on their lives from as teens and to adults. We look at again, students through the lens of, but when they become teens, they've had some years getting there. What brought them there? What experiences did they have getting there that determine or have made them the teens they are? And we also want to, as time goes on, find a way to help our teachers understand the student population in which they're dealing with, and train the students to be more aware, to build their self-esteem, because Newark is not just a hole in the wall as some people think it is. Newark has a very, very, very a rich history. We have a tremendous number of artifacts that we have in our office over at Malcolm X Shabazz High School. And what we need down the road, from perhaps some teams who are really serious about history, to assist in the cataloging of those archives, those artifacts rather, and to work with us in getting more interviews. So there's a broad body of information, and I don't want to take too much time to go through a lot of it, but there's one more piece that you showed the slide with 2 educators, James Miller Baxter and Dr. E. Elmer Flagg. And that's such an interesting, am I done? Oh.
No.
Okay. I thought I had the hook. I'm a musician, so things like that happen. But James Miller Baxter, for all intents and purposes, was the first African-American or person of color to be a principal in the Newark Public Schools. And it was nearly—
the image of Mr. Baxter. Sorry, Mr. Min.
Yeah. And it was nearly 100 years later that you get another or African-American administrator, and that was Dr. Flagg. I mean, so there's a big gap. There's some history that it's like, why did it take so long? And then, well, I could go on, but I'll stop because I know there are other people who need to speak. Oh, you have another question?
Well, actually, since this is kind of like a brief chat, and I'm really excited, I really look forward to talking with Tom a little bit more about this, because I think there's such an opportunity for us to maybe like have some kind of create some kind of pool where the teams who want to volunteer with archives can, and just create some archives. So, you know, definitely when I speak to Tom at the Newark Public Library, I'll reach out to you guys. But if it's okay, because we have about like 5 more minutes left, if anyone has any questions or any additional things to say, please share them with me. Or, I mean, share them with the group.
You have to unmute them, I think.
Did I mute everybody? Okay. Can someone type to me in chat if they're looking to, oh, hey, Amanda. Okay, I have Christina muted. Is there anyone with any questions or something that was really exciting for them that they heard today? Or is there anything that inspired folks about any of the stories? Or is there anything you all want to see more of from either the library or one of the archives? I'm just very curious. I'm using this opportunity to hear what folks are kind of, because we have so many rich archives in Newark, and I just feel like they're underutilized for the education of our teens.
Well, Noah, how can we get that information out to the larger public, especially now when the schools are going to be, the buildings will be closed through June, and maybe there's some way if the library gets open. Well, you don't have to go there, but because you can do it online, that we can create some projects to draw the teens or even younger folk into using the library resources, perhaps to, if they can, tap into some of the interviews that have been done already. I can send you a short video or a still images piece to show some of the artifacts, and that may interest some students to do some further research right online.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So you're saying like further when we get back from all of this to create it?
Well, we can use this as a starting point. If you want something to look at or that you can distribute to your network, throughout the network, they can start looking at some of the artifacts that we have photos of, and even some documents that might lead them to wonder, like, what was this all about? Who was this guy, James Miller Baxter? Where did he come from? And his story is very interesting. He came out of Philadelphia. He was 19 when he came to Newark to teach, and within a couple of years, he was a principal. However, before he was a principal there was a Mr. King and a Ms. Ward, who was also African-Americans who were involved with education. And we can talk about the building at 15 State Street. Maybe somebody knows where the plaque is.
Yeah, I mean, I've been studying Mr. Baxter a lot, and some things you guys may not know is that he was the principal he was the Black principal at the colored school. And he was actually the person who was in place when Irene Pataquam, who was like a Black, multiracial, her father was Indian or Native American, she integrated Newark schools. So
at the high school level.
Yeah, at the high school level, because the high schools were not integrated.
And Baxter Terrace itself was named for him.
Yeah, that we opened it up with.
Yeah, that was his complex. Now it's gone.
And I think Baxter Terrace was the first public housing project in Newark to accept African American tenants. I believe so.
And it was integrated.
Yeah, it was. I think though in the beginning it was segregated, but we can have this conversation another.
Well, we want to get. Let's pass it on to the kids.
Things going on.
Yeah, let's pass it on to the kids to do that.
Yeah. So
yes.
So I guess Colleen and
I know there are teens who want to say a few things.
Yeah.
So Amanda, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask the question about how will these like stories and interviews and all this information be distributed? Because I feel as though they should be implemented into school like as a lesson, since like we talk about the Black history, we talk about the history in the past, but we don't talk about how we're evolving now and how like the LGBTQ community, how they're affected now and how they've changed throughout the years. Like, how can these stories help us now?
Yeah, well, I hear you, Amanda, and I know one of the reasons why I thought of this maybe like a year and a half ago is because one of the students in the teen room at North Star, they were working on a report on LGBT leaders, and the LGBT leaders they were profiling were all of these people from other parts of the country. And I was like, oh, it would be so essential for the teachers who are actually doing LGBT programming, studies in their schools like North Star and other places, that they're using the archives about folks who've like broken barriers here in Newark, for folks to have that information. So I think one of the this is one of those opportunities to start thinking about that and making something that's pretty transparent that educators can kind of pick up and use as they need to. Colleen and anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to say, building off her question, has there ever been any effort to make like a documentary that pulls together this information, or like a series of documentaries, or like a YouTube channel or something like that, which would be like shareable or something that could be shown in schools in order to like facilitate dialogue like this?
I'm not sure. Tom or Bill would be the ones.
We're kind of doing that now by these videos that we're producing now.
Yeah.
You know, these sessions we've been doing since the COVID-19 shutdown. These are being shared on YouTube and on Facebook, so people can go look at them there. And anyone, I mean, you don't have to be a Newark Public Library cardholder to see them either. Anybody can look at them. So they're.
And we're going to try to share on Instagram as well. So hopefully more teens can see it there.
Yeah.
Hi, Beth.
Yeah, I would say for Queer Newark, like, we don't have specifically a documentary. I think that would be great for Queer Newark to do. Our co-director, Whitney Strube, was filming some stuff, like when the LGBTQ Center was on 11 Halsey. He's on the board there, so him and a few of the community members were filming with the intention of perhaps putting together one day a documentary. But I want to also point again to Out in the Night as an amazing documentary, very powerful to watch. Dreams Deferred on Sakia Gunn, who was a young masculine of center lesbian who unfortunately was murdered in Newark, but her death galvanized activism throughout Newark for the LGBTQ community, including creating the LGBTQ Center and Newark Pride. So things like that were all, done in honor and to help youth throughout the city, LGBTQ youth. So I think you can look to things like that. Yeah, and on our page, we also have, as far as media, you can look at I made a podcast, so if you're looking for small digestible chunks to share with people that are shorter than the longer interviews, you can do that as well. And there's also a small introductory video that our other co-director made on the main page. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we?
Well, it's more of a comment.
Amanda too. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. It's just more of a comment. I think this is such a great forum, and I really commend you all just joining together to really uplift the voices, whether it be teens, and really try to empower them. My name is Amanda. I'm a part of the GEM project. I brought some of my teams. Victoria was in here earlier, as well as Amanda, who has the same initials as me. So I was like, tell her, like, you probably should put your whole last name because they're gonna think I'm you. And a lot of the work that we're doing right now, especially with a lot of high school students, they're working to create a policy brief on student voice. Last summer, they worked on it. And they surveyed about 77 high school students. Our spring high school and college fellows, they have been working alongside each other to revise the policy brief, which I thought was a great opportunity to get some of our young people involved in the archives in some way, because right now they have surveyed over 140. They're trying to push towards 500 before the end of the school year, and to really make it something as almost like a tool to advocate. So I'm wondering how we can really try to connect more because they have a lot of great insights, over 140 young people, insights about their thoughts, about student voice, about relationships within schools, about teachers within schools. And I think a lot of this could be valuable if it's incorporated in some way in the archive once it's done.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. I'll probably email you again to get another synopsis on that.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any more questions, we're gonna close out this brief chat. I'm trying to learn how to do brief programming. And so I just want to say thank you to Tom and Kristen and Bill for all the other folks in the room. Well, all of you guys are hard workers, but Tom and Kristen and Bill, they do a lot of shovel work and very heavy lifting, preserving the stories of folks here in Newark. And I just want to thank them for joining us on such short notice today. And I look forward to having a conversation with Tom in the New Jersey room and then reaching out to you guys in the next couple of months. At the least, you know, I definitely want to have a document that has all of the archives, and then moving beyond that, I love Colleen's idea of a video or a documentary, but basically all of the teachers I spoke to were like, it just needs to be free and easy. And once we can do that for them, we can do it. So please email me at nwilliams@npl.org. I'm going to, if you don't see this attachment on Facebook, I'm going to put it up there, I guess, in about 30 minutes or 15 minutes. So if you don't see it on there, email me. Or if you have any other questions, please feel free to do that. Please don't forget to submit to the COVID-19 archive.
Yes, please, please.
If you may, and please visit all of the different links and archives. And if you're from Newark and you see some old yearbooks, please check all the dates and check in with Beth because they might need. So
it's the 70s she's missing, right?
Yeah, there's a couple. So
yeah, most of the high school yearbooks from Newark between 1950 and 1990 have been digitized and are available on the Newark Public Library Digital Archive.
Yes, and Amanda, if you have any questions for Kristen directly or Tom, or any of the youth here, or anyone who actually will see this in the future in the next couple of days, feel free to email me and I can send you the information, or we'll also have the document. So on that note, I will say thank you. I look forward to
Thank you.
again in social media, and thank you for joining us.
Been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
So long, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.